CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Juliet Mann. Our top stories. China's imports and exports dropped faster than expected in July. Does this mean more government stimulus is on the way?
Our other headlines: Italy approves a 40% windfall tax on banks' profits, with proceeds to go to help those struggling with the cost of living.
Zoom, the video conferencing company synonymous with remote working, tells its staff to stop working from home and show up in person at the office.
Could there be an historic deal to end deforestation in the Amazon? Talks open in Brazil on cross-border enforcement.
And a golden goodbye as China tops the medal table at the World University Games in Chengdu.
China's trade slowed more than expected in July, raising expectations that more economic stimulus will be needed to prop up growth. Imports plunged 12.4% in July, year-on-year, the biggest fall in 2023, to just over $200 billion. Exports dropped 14.5% to around $282 billion. That represents the fastest decline in exports since early 2020.
Mark Oswald is Chief Economist and Global Strategist at ADM Investor Services. Good to see you again, Mark. Well, this is all a bit disappointing. What's going on?
Well, to some extent, I think it's probably exaggerated in terms of some of the import weakness, which, import weakness always points to weak domestic demand. Some of it's just due to higher prices, discouraging buyers, some other factors due to the seasonality of agricultural imports. But I think, overall, really, what it's telling us, you've got exports to the US down more than 20%. Exports to the EU down more than 20%. That really tells the biggest story of the lot. One would have to try and work out to what extent that reflects actually active attempts by the EU and the US to actually diversify their imports, and to what extent it reflects weaker demand. I think it's a bit of both.
I mean, there were a few higher value export categories that saw a significant increase in the first 7 months of the year, including cars, handbags, suitcases. Is that enough, do you think, to change the growth outlook?
No, I don't. And I think really the other data that we've had out recently is the foreign direct investment numbers into China. And they are down 87% year on year, at just 4.9 billion. And that basically is the weakest since the records began back in 1998. That tells a story largely, I think, of foreign companies. It's not necessarily not investing in China, but not reinvesting the profits they're making there because they feel the economic environment is so uncertain. And, this is another story about confidence because of all the measures that have been taken. People are not really quite sure where to go into, and secondly, what opportunities there are going to be.
So let's talk about investor confidence. So looking at oil, looking at gold, at stocks, what's the market's reaction?
The market, the market reaction was to say basically this is dotting an I and crossing a T. There have been a series of shocks over the last couple of weeks. The Japanese yield curve control change, the downgrading of the US debt, the downgrading of US bank ratings, and indeed that Italian bank levy. And confidence is basically starting to wane, and it comes on top after a sustained period of people being very disappointed by the growth in China this year so far.
And how about China's domestic demand? That's also flagging. I mean, is another sign of that consumer nervousness the fact that passenger car sales fell for the second month in July, despite all of that discounting and government tax incentives?
Yes, and it's also reflected in mortgage demand during July, which was down about 30% relative to June. To a certain extent, the July numbers are a corollary of the June numbers, i.e. there was a lot of strength in June outside of passenger car sales, but there was strength in the housing market. And so to a certain extent, there was payback. But one has to cut through this month-to-month stuff and basically say that there is, I think really what the message is in terms of the economic stimulus is there's not enough of a shock and awe factor, which actually gets people thinking, right, I really need to change my view on things and act with a bit of confidence. And that's basically what's missing at the moment, both in consumer terms and in business terms.
Mark Oswald, thank you very much.
The deal to save British Volt, the UK battery maker, is in doubt. According to administrators, the Australian company Recharge Industries has failed to make a final payment of nearly $11 million for the company, which is hoping to build a $5 billion factory in the UK. Recharge and its parent company have disputed that it's in default.
Tesla's chief financial officer, Zachary Kirkhorn, has stepped down after 4.5 years in the role. His departure follows a rare period of stability in Tesla's senior ranks, which has at times seen periods of rapid turnover. Kirkhorn, who spent a total of 13 years at the company, will be replaced by the current chief accounting officer.
Switzerland's UBS Group is revamping the leadership of its investment banking division. Among almost 40 appointments, 6 are former Credit Suisse bankers. It's UBS's latest integration with its former rival and follows the emergency takeover of Credit Suisse in June.
Swiss mining and commodity trading giant Glencore has recorded a sharp drop in its core earnings for the first half of the year. Profits fell to $9.4 billion, half the record number it posted a year ago. The group has also cut returns to its shareholders. It comes as the surge in commodity prices that follow the war in Ukraine eases.
Italy has sent shockwaves across its banking sector with a surprise 40% windfall tax on banks' excess profits derived from higher interest rates. The levy is worth several billion euros and will be used to cut taxes and offer financial support to mortgage holders whose loans have soared. Spain and Hungary have imposed similar measures. Well, let's talk to Lorenzo Codogno, visiting professor in practice at the London School of Economics and a former chief economist at the Italian Treasury. Lorenzo, welcome back to the programme. Good to see you. So what's behind this rather surprise move?
Well, I think it's a major mistake because it's clearly a populist move to kind of attract political support. I would say if you ask Italians, probably 90% would say that they are in favor of taxing banks. It's an easy target. But the reality is that it doesn't really provide a stable competition and tax framework for investment in Italy, which is pretty bad. And moreover, it could actually also undermine a stable flow of credit to the economy in Italy, given that banks now have to worry about the interest rate margin.
So, in your view, what's likely to be the reaction then in terms of those investors looking at Italy in the long term as a prospect?
Well, the measure is still not final because it was approved by the Cabinet of Ministers. It is a low degree, meaning that it has to go through Parliament in September, and there will be changes, of course. Moreover, I think it will be also challenged on constitutional grounds because it is retroactive and it hits only a specific sector. So it's not the final word. But if it goes through, and probably will, I think it will produce damage on Italy's stance towards financial markets, and Italy's stance towards competition in general. So I think it's negative. It will make permanent damages for the perception on Italy's economy by international investors.
But it might do rather well for the government. I mean, there presumably are lots of votes in giving the banks a good kicking.
Yeah, that's the case. That's why they did it. But again, it might produce permanent damages on the economy, which will be hard to recover. So I think net is certainly a very bad move by the government going forward.
So if not this, what were the other solutions that might have been introduced?
Well, first of all, we are addressing an alleged market failure here by means of taxation, which is not a good idea. If there is a market failure, you should address competition law. You should address markets, change the regulation in markets. And there is plenty of ways to do it in the banking sector. There is a supervision of the Bank of Italy. There is a very active authority on competition and markets. So I think if there is a market failure, we should address with market regulation. Now, I think doing that via taxation is a mistake because, first of all, it's not the right tool. And secondly, it could actually send the wrong message. I got many questions today, who's going to be next? And certainly there is a very good candidate here, which is the construction sector, because the construction sector made a lot of money over the past 2 or 3 years, given the very generous subsidies introduced by the government and next generation EU infrastructure projects. So again, this might produce a series of concerns on other sectors of the economy and produce permanent damage in the perception by investors.
Lorenzo, we'll get you back on when they start clobbering the construction sector. Good to see you. Lorenzo Codogno, visiting professor in practice at the LSE in London.
The video conferencing firm known for facilitating remote work is now asking its employees to stop working from home and come to the office. Zoom is joining the parade of companies requiring workers to show up in person after pandemic lockdowns. And our correspondent, John Terrett, always shows up at work at the New York Stock Exchange. Hi there, John. Now, look, there is some irony here.
I do.
Yeah, I know you do. There's some irony here, isn't there, that the company that facilitated all that work from home are now ordering staff back to the office.
Irony, Julia, this is comedy gold. I mean, we should get Ricky Gervais to write a script about this. This is really very funny stuff. Ricky Gervais, for people who don't know, is a well-known English UK actor and scriptwriter behind the television program The Office. Look, no Zoom, no work from home, okay? It's as simple as that. And that's what's so incredible about this. This is real satire. Nobody ever says, why don't we Google Hangout at 4:15? Nobody ever says, why don't we Microsoft Teams at 5:30? They just don't. They say, well, Zoom you at 6:30. And that's the thing. In the same way that people don't ever say, why don't you search something on Bing, which is Microsoft's search engine, they always say, why don't you just Google it? So Zoom has become a buzzword for video conferencing the world over. And now the big enabler of work from home is telling its staff, you've got to come into the office 2 days a week. Now, they have 9 offices around the world on 3 continents. So what they're saying is if you live within an 80-kilometre radius, and I did the math, so for you in the UK, that's like going from centre of London down to Portsmouth. So if you draw a circle with a compass from the centre of London down to Portsmouth and then circle it, all those people in that area who work for Zoom are going to have to go into the office at least 2 days a week. Now, the story behind this is that Zoom had a tremendous run-up in success during COVID. It was just a darling of COVID. Then its stock slipped by 83% between October 21 and May 2022. They've had 1,300 job cuts, may even be more. The CEO has taken a 98% pay cut. So now that COVID is over, they're, struggling a little bit one way and another. They say it's about connection and collaboration, which I truly believe it is. I think it's very difficult to get connection and collaboration among your staff when you never see them and they're working in their sweatpants in their dining room. I think it's also about control. You need a little bit of control if you're a boss, and this helps them to do that. And they're not the only company. Disney, Amazon, Meta, Salesforce, many others have said pretty much the same thing. The thing is, of course, the staff are rebelling. The staff are revolting. Well, we know that. The staff are revolting. They're saying, we're not coming back to the office. So we'll see how Zoom gets on with this.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? John, let's talk about SoftBank, because they posted results, a surprise loss.
I know, eyebrows raised here yesterday. Bing! Goodness me, we didn't see that one coming. SoftBank, giant Japanese bank, global behemoth. This is their April to June period. So for them, I think it's their first quarter. But for the rest of us, it's the second quarter. I never quite know why that happens. It just does. So surprise loss. And at the moment, SoftBank shares are down 0.7%, almost 1%. But it wasn't all bad news. The Vision Fund, which is their venture capitalist department, which they started in 2017, that swung to profit for the first time in 6 quarters. But ARM, which is their software development and microchip company based in Cambridge, in which there is a huge amount of interest and in which there is an IPO coming up, likely before the end of the year, which is causing a great stir because of the kind of company that ARM is and the products it has. It turned in a loss in this latest quarter within the overall SoftBank earnings, ahead of what's expected to be a pretty big IPO sometime between now and December.
Well, there's a lot of anticipation ahead of that IPO. Let's talk about the markets. John, this morning, New York Stock Exchange, what's going on?
Yes. Gains of Monday gone. Bye-bye gains. I'll tell you about the numbers in just a second, but we had a good day yesterday, and they've all been wiped out today. Also, Moody's, which is a credit rating agency, has downgraded the credit rating of 10 of the regional banks. Now, I've been banging on about this for the last couple of months. This banking crisis that we had earlier this year is mo-def, not over. And here's Moody's coming in saying that they're downgrading the credit rating of 10 of them. But more seriously than that, they're thinking of downgrading the credit rating of 6 big ones, including the New York Bank of Mellon, which is a major clearing bank here. Everything that happens in the exchange has to be cleared, finalized, if you will, signed off on, if you will, by JP Morgan Chase or the New York Bank of Mellon. And Moody's is citing the New York Bank of Mellon, which is a little bit worrying, I think. So banking shares not doing well today. The big thing this week is CPI, consumer price inflation, on Thursday. And now I will do my little turn and have a look at the scores on the doors. The Dow is down 316 points and the S&P 500 42 points. There we are. You see, I'm the Isla St. Clair of the stock exchange, aren't I?
You really are. You really are. And we're all showing our age because we're all chuckling and knowing exactly what you mean. John Terrett at New York Stock Exchange, thank you.
Everybody under 40 is asking who's Isla St. Clair. You're watching CGTN, still ahead. Niger on the brink. Economic and military sanctions from some African countries fall flat. Now what?
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliet Mann.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more...
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Regional efforts to restore the elected government in Niger have once again been rejected by leaders of the military coup. A diplomatic mission from the ECOWAS regional bloc have been told they're no longer welcome as their presence would be a security risk.
This all comes as the military installed a new prime minister and after a deadline passed for them to give up power. West African countries will meet on Thursday, where the possibility of military intervention in Niger could be given the green light. Let's talk to our correspondent Deji Badmus in Lagos, in neighbouring Nigeria. Deji, so the coup leaders appear to be digging in with this latest move.
You're right, Jamie. They're of course, expanding their grip on power now, and that's what it is. And with what they have done now, we understand ECOWAS was planning to send a delegation to Niamey before Thursday, and now the junta, the military junta there has said it is not ready to entertain any delegation from ECOWAS. So basically shutting the door to any form of negotiation now or dialogue before this crucial meeting on Thursday. And they might be doing this deliberately, seeing that even within ECOWAS, there's no unanimity as to whether there should be a military intervention in Niger. So they're obviously consolidating their hold on power. It's very possible they may make further announcement before Thursday, because you know, everyone is looking up to ECOWAS to see what's going to happen, but no one expects that there's going to be any military intervention after the meeting on Thursday. It appears ECOWAS will still continue to pursue the diplomatic route. The United States, the European Union have all come out to say they would prefer a dialogue to a military intervention. And you saw that the U.S. Acting Deputy Secretary of State was in Niger. I'm talking about Victoria Nuland, was in Niger yesterday and actually met with some members of the military junta. Unable to meet, of course, with General Tiani, but met with some of them. And she obviously came out to say, look, negotiation will be difficult, but that there's still an opportunity for dialogue. So everyone is waiting to see what ECOWAS does. But from what we are gathering and from what we are seeing, it appears ECOWAS will continue to pursue that diplomatic option, because as we speak today, there's no broad support, if you like, for military intervention. Even in Nigeria, the Nigerian Senate has asked the President and ECOWAS to continue to pursue dialogue. I mean, we've seen the same call from some other countries as well. So, but then we just have to wait and see how ECOWAS reacts to this latest action now by the military junta there, saying they are not ready to receive any delegation from ECOWAS. Jamie?
The installed Prime Minister, Lamine Zen, has previously been on the wrong side of a coup, hasn't he? What else do we know about the new man?
You're right. I mean, he served as the Prime Minister of the country between 2002 and 2010, when the government he served as the government of President Mamadou Tanja was overthrown in a military coup. And now he is back as the Prime Minister of the country, and under a similar circumstance. It's just that in this case, he's coming to serve under a military regime that has just overthrown a democratically elected one. So he's an economist, and he's very well known in Niger. Very popular. Before now, he worked with the Africa Development Bank, and for some people, it's a surprise that he's accepted to serve under this government, considering what happened to the government he served in the past. But then that's what it is. But other than his appointment, the junta has also appointed a new commander now for the Presidential Guard. Remember, General Tiani was the commander of the Presidential Guard under President Bazoum before he staged the coup. So there's a new commander of the Presidential Guard now that General Tiani is president. And there's a likelihood we might see more appointments in the coming days as the junta continues to consolidate its hold on power. Jamie?
Deji, keep us posted. Good to talk to you. Talk to you again tomorrow, no doubt. Our correspondent Deji Badmus in Lagos, in neighbouring Nigeria.
The coup in Niger is the latest of many across West and Central Africa in recent years, each one raising concerns over worsening regional security.
Most have been spearheaded by elite military units, their leaders citing insecurity or political corruption as justifications. Our Nairobi correspondent Robert Nagila looks at some of the recent political takeovers and the people behind them.
In the last 3 years, 4 African countries in the Sahel region have seen their governments overthrown by the military at least 6 times. Mali has had 2 military coups, first in August 2020 and then in May 2021. Neighbouring Burkina Faso has also experienced 2 coups in January 2022 and in September the same year. Guinea's government was overthrown in September 2021, while Niger's democratically elected government was overthrown in July 2023. The coups in the Sahel region all have one thing in common. All but one were carried out by elite units of the military, by special forces trained by Western countries and are usually better equipped than the conventional army. In some cases, some of these elite units were the ones protecting the sitting president, only to turn around and take power.
In order for a coup to be successful, it has to be initiated, planned, and executed by those who are most closest to power. So it's more or less, the military that you use for regime protection often becomes the same military that takes you out of power.
Colonel Assimi Goïta, Mali's military leader, was the head of the Autonomous Special Forces Battalion, a special forces unit of Mali's armed forces used to battle insurgents in the north. Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, who is the leader in Guinea now, was the commander of the Special Forces Group in Guinea, responsible for the president's security. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who is Burkina Faso's president, served as a peacekeeper in Mali under the UN peacekeeping mission MINUSMA. He was involved in the counterinsurgency operations in his country. General Abdurrahman Chiani, the man who took power in Niger recently, was the commander of the Presidential Guard overseeing the security of deposed President Mohamed Bazoum. In Mali and Burkina Faso's coups, the leaders accused the government of inadequate support against insurgents.
There are so many factors. Leaders who overpromise and underdeliver has become a key issue. And this is why across the coup countries that we've seen, there is always this justification of the fact that the economy is in dire situation. There is high level of corruption. There is insecurity. A real democratic system does not, give opportunities for these kind of elements to occur.
The military administrations in Mali, Burkina Faso and Guinea have pledged their support for Niger against any military intervention by regional bloc ECOWAS. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Oh, excuse me. Ukraine says Russian missiles have destroyed apartment buildings and a hotel in the city of Pokrovsk, near Donetsk. The region's governor says a second missile hit 40 minutes after the first.
At least 7 people were killed and dozens of others injured. President Zelensky tweeted that Russia will be held accountable for the attacks. The ruble has weakened against the dollar, hampered by strong local demand for foreign currency. It's headed back to the 16th-month low seen on Monday. Last week, the ruble dropped more than 4% against the dollar and euro in one of its worst weeks this year. Russian authorities say lower export revenue and rebounding imports are the primary cause of the weakening currency.
The first group of asylum seekers have boarded a controversial housing barge moored off the south coast of England.
Up to 500 men will eventually live on the vessel, known as Bibi Stockholm, while they await the outcomes of their asylum applications. Human rights groups have described the scheme as inhumane, but government ministers insist it's safe and will save money. Some asylum charities claim the UK has intensified hostile policies towards refugees in a bid to reduce the number of small boat crossings.
Our correspondent, Yola David, has been following all of this. Now, this has been going on for months, years. Why is the UK pursuing this policy now?
Probably two reasons, ideological and also trying to save money, because by putting people on this barge, which apparently is going to hold 500 people, even though only 15 are on the barge so far, is that they could save money because it costs $7.5 million per day to house 50,000 migrants in British hotels at the moment. It could be that. It's more likely to be ideological because this current UK government, and for the last 12 years, is pursuing a policy of trying to reduce the number of illegal migrants that come here. There is a difference between those who come here without documents and those who want to be and will apply for asylum and want to be here as refugees from whichever country which is oppressed or a war zone. But the difficulty for the government is, I think, not just in policing the number of migrants who come here, but also how they deal with a number of cases. And that is a difficulty when they try and put people on barges. It seemed to be intolerant. It seemed to be treating people differently to, of course, how maybe the majority of people in Britain would want migrants to be treated.
This has got lots and lots of coverage in the UK on the newspapers, the TV channels. But, I mean, it is worth saying this is not just a UK story. It reaches across Europe and all around the world.
Yes, and this barge is from the Netherlands. It was fitted out to operate in other parts of Europe because probably Germany, Austria, France has a higher population of migrants trying to get into those countries than even the UK. Maybe the UK is helped by the English Channel, although an increasing number of people are taking huge risks in crossing the Channel to try and get into the UK. So it is an issue for many, many countries. The British authorities are trying to argue, well, maybe asylum seekers should be dealt with in the first country they arrive, which, of course, is very rarely Britain. It is normally Greece or Spain or Italy before they get to Germany and France. There is a problem probably in Britain, and I think that's seen in other countries as well, in the backlog of people that they have to deal with in terms of asylum cases. I'll give you one example, right? Last year, the UK authorities made decisions on 18,000 asylum seekers and granted 14,000 people the right to be here, 76%. Now, France, with a similar population to Britain, actually dealt with 130,000 decisions and granted access to more than 50% of people to stay. Now, that tells you a different story about the efficiency of the system in France to here in the UK. But absolutely, the language is getting harder, the comments are getting harder by people within the Conservative Party. Why? Well, maybe because there is an UK election looming sometime in the next 12 months.
Yolo, thank you very much. Our correspondent, Yolo Abdavith.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. The UK's polluted rivers. Now the Thames gets a new super sewer to try and clean up London's iconic but dirty waterway.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
What do we mean when we talk about the difference?
Brazen axe.
The difference is in the detail, the background,
Defense ministers from
the wider angle and perspective of every story. Wherever the story may be. CGTN. See the difference.
We are all connected. Across borders, across continents, connected by ideas, a shared humanity. Stay connected.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Juliet Mann. Our top stories. China's imports and exports dropped faster than expected in July, raising expectations that more government stimulus could be on the way.
Italy approves a 40% windfall tax on banks' profits, with proceeds to go to help those struggling with the cost of living.
And Zoom, the video conferencing company synonymous with remote working, tells its staff to stop working from home and show up in person in the office.
China says it's making every effort to mitigate flood control and relief efforts.
In the northeast regions, clear-up operations continue in the aftermath of Typhoon Doksuri, which destroyed roads and buildings. As one of the country's main rice-producing areas, the city of Wuchang is threatened with considerable financial losses. Vast areas of paddy fields remain underwater. Well, CGTN's correspondent Jiang Saran reports.
I'm now reporting from Wuchang City in northeast China's Heilongjiang province. Wuchang City has had heavy rains over the past 5 days and took a major hit from the massive flooding. Although you can see it's quite nice today, but there is a good chance that it will start to rain again in the next few days. Here in Wuchang, a total of 18 towns were affected by the flooding. And now the local government and community members are working together to ensure emergency supplies and medical care. So far, a total of 50,000 residents have been safely evacuated, and among them, around 10,000 people had to find temporary homes at the resettlement sites. Actually, earlier today, we visited one of the major sites here in Wuchang City, the Yachen Middle School, and currently there are 1,300 people there taking shelters. And they told me that good arrangements have been made and they're not worried. And also, attention is definitely on the damaged rice paddies here in Wuchang City. What can be certain is that the floods will have some impact on the harvest in autumn. However, the scale of the impact is still uncertain. As the waters have not yet receded, the total affected area of the rice field is still being assessed.
South Korea has moved scouts attending the World Scout Jamboree from their campsite as Typhoon Khanun approaches. More than 1,000 buses moved 37,000 people to safer inland locations. The event, which started last Wednesday, has faced many problems, including sickness due to extreme temperatures and complaints of poor sanitary conditions.
Intense storms have swept across the eastern United States, leaving 2 people dead and more than 1 million homes without power. Tornado watches and warnings have been posted across 10 states, including Tennessee and New York. Thousands of flights have been cancelled or delayed. The storms come as large parts of the southern United States are still under heat warnings.
There's widespread flooding in Nepal's capital after a river breached its banks following heavy monsoon rain. The Kathmandu Valley and surrounding region is home to around 4 million people. Authorities have also warned residents near the eastern Sinduli River to leave as water levels there rise.
Hundreds of firefighters in Portugal are battling several blazes as the country endures another heatwave. More than 1,000 people have had to leave their homes near the town of Ordemira. At least 9 firefighters have been injured tackling the flames. Temperatures in excess of 40 degrees Celsius are expected in much of the Iberian Peninsula this week.
The south of France is the hottest and driest region of the country and regularly battles drought as well as wildfires.
But in the north of the country, that's usually the wettest area. Farmers are having to find new ways to keep their crops and animals alive as water shortages there become a regular occurrence. CGTN's correspondent Ross Cullen reports.
Jean-Christophe Ruffin checks the beetroots on his farm. It's one of the crops he grows to feed his livestock. The weather is crucial for farmers, but it's increasingly hard to forecast, and dry spells are having a more and more significant impact.
Climate change is real and we can see it. Harvest dates are a little earlier in the calendar than when we were young. Compared with 30 years ago, the harvest is now taking place 15 days earlier.
Increasingly frequent dry winters are exacerbating the water storage situation in the north, meaning some farmers are having to change their practices.
We have to adapt because our working environment, our factory, is all you can see out here. It's nature. So we're adapting a little. We're going to change our tillage practices a little. We're trying to keep the soil moist in case of spring droughts like this year.
Diversification is one way to manage, and alongside the beetroot, Jean-Christophe grows wheat, potatoes and maize. In the sheds, his herd is fed on the food he grows on site. These cows produce milk for market, and he also raises chickens for meat.
The north is one of the wettest regions in France, but even here they're starting to see the impact of increased winter and summer droughts.
This area of France is border country. Belgium is just a couple of kilometres away. It's a heavily populated area with a growing number of houses and widespread industry using huge quantities of water. Agriculture is also a major consumer of water. As more areas of France deal with the impacts of unseasonal dry spells, how to manage water use in the future is a major point of discussion.
We must all pay attention to water. I think we also need to harvest rainwater when it falls a lot. When it falls too much, we could collect it in basins to allow it to slowly enter the water table and recharge underground storage.
Another impact of climate change is that the regularity of the seasons is changing. It's becoming increasingly hard for farmers like Jean-Christophe to predict rainfall, plus sudden winds can blow in. And France is starting to witness longer, more intense droughts in more and more areas of the country. Ross Cullen, CGTN, Bétigny, Northern France.
New rules banning all deforestation in the Amazon by 2030 could be announced in the next 24 hours.
Leaders of the 8 Amazon countries are meeting for the first time in 14 years, hoping to agree a pact covering deforestation, illegal mining and cross-border policing. Resuming the talks was one of Brazil's President Lula da Silva's election pledges last year, after deforestation soared under his predecessor, Jair Bolsonaro. The summit's taking place in the Brazilian city of Belém. Our correspondent Paulo Cabral is there. Good to see you, Paulo. So, who's at the summit, and are they on the same page about what needs to be done?
Well, that's what they are trying to do, exactly, to be on the same page on these discussions happening here in the city of Belém. I'm here at the press room of the Hangar Convention Center in this Amazon city. Media from all over the world gathered to follow these discussions of representatives from the 8 Amazon countries. 5 countries are represented by their heads of state or government here. The host, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, and also the presidents of Colombia, Bolivia and Peru, and the Prime Minister of Guyana. Other 3 countries, Suriname, Venezuela and Ecuador, sent in high officials but not their heads of state or government for this discussion. The opening remarks were made by the host, President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who spoke about the importance of closer contacts between these countries to move forward. Let's hear what President Lula da Silva had to say.
Há 14 anos que não nos reuníamos.
It's been 14 years since we had our last summit, and now we're at a time when the climate crisis is getting much, much worse. Never has it been so urgent for us to increase our cooperation. This challenge of our times and the chances that we have to put things right demand our joint action.
Now, before the other representatives from the countries got to speak, they actually had to hear a little the people, the activists, the social movements that had been here in Belém for a few days, taking part in the Amazon dialogues, discussing important issues for the civil society. And so the leaders had to hear about their concerns with the oil exploration in the Amazon, the threats to the survival and the culture of the originary people, the indigenous people of the Amazon, and also about the need for sustainable development in the Amazon that will not only preserve the environment but also improve social and economic conditions here in the region and other big concerns of the people that live in the Amazon. Now, from the summit, from the heads of state side of things, there is expectation that until tomorrow there will be a joint statement that will be released, and that's exactly the idea, to try to put all these leaders, all these countries on the same page and possibly to have a joint position for the 2024 climate conference of the United Nations, also expected to happen here in the city of Belém, and where these countries are likely to demand rich countries to fulfill their commitments in helping the Amazon countries to preserve the forest.
Paulo, as you've said, this is being led by Brazil and President Lula. How much of a priority is this for his government?
Well, look, analysts, environmentalists in Brazil are still looking into that, because President Lula da Silva did do the defense of the Amazon, the preservation of the environment, one of his milestones during this political campaign, during the electoral campaign. And he did take some important measures like strengthening the monitoring and control organs that work in the Amazon, and created a new ministry for the indigenous people, something that had never happened in Brazil. And we did see some reduction in deforestation in the Amazon over the past few months. So yes, there are some signs that President Lula da Silva is walking his talk. However, there is still strong pressure from, for example, the farming sector and other sectors in Brazil that favor development instead of conservation. This is a discussion that we had seen a lot in the first two terms of President Lula da Silva in the early 2000s, and in that period the development side of the government ended up being stronger. So we have to see now how this will play in this third government of Lula da Silva.
Paulo Cabral in Belém, thank you very much.
The UK's election watchdog says it was the victim of a complex cyber attack which was discovered last year. The Electoral Commission apologises for the security breach in which the data of millions of voters was accessible to hackers. The organisation says hostile actors first accessed its systems in 2021 but did not give further details of who might be responsible, and added it was difficult to know the exact number of people affected.
Lawyers for jailed former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan have challenged his conviction on corruption charges. Lawyers expect the appeal to be heard on Wednesday. It comes after Khan was sentenced to jail on charges of selling state gifts during his tenure as Premier. The case is one of more than 200 cases he's faced since being ousted from office. His supporters say the charges are politically motivated.
Western Australia is to scrap its recently enforced laws aimed at protecting Aboriginal cultural heritage sites after the legislation was criticised for being complex and divisive. The law was introduced after the 46,000-year-old Juukan Gorge rock shelter was destroyed by the mining giant Rio Tinto in 2020, following opposition from farmers and landowners. State Premier Roger Cook says the state will restore and amend 1970s legislation to ensure that such a tragedy is never repeated.
A Greek football fan has died after clashes broke out between two rival teams in Athens. Supporters of AEK Athens and visiting Dinamo Zagreb threw flares, stones and makeshift explosives outside a stadium where the visiting team was training. Police arrested 98 people. The teams were due to play the first leg of a UEFA Champions League qualifier that's now been postponed.
A 25-kilometre-long super sewer is near completion in London after years of construction work. The Thames Tideway Tunnel will divert water from drains which currently flood into the River Thames during heavy rainfall.
The infrastructure is being given a guarded welcome by environmental groups, but polluted rivers and coastline is a problem across the UK, which is largely going unchecked. CGTN's correspondent Paul Barber reports.
Leaving the River Thames behind and descending deep underground into London's newest megastructure, the Thames Tideway Tunnel. While engineers can still walk the tunnel for now, that won't be the case for long.
In a year or so's time, this will be filled with sewage, so we wouldn't want to be here. But this is it. This is kind of one small part of 25 kilometres of tunnel that snakes right under London.
The tunnel's route runs from West London to sewage treatment works on the Thames estuary. It's being built to deal with a major problem for London's iconic river. When it rains, the only overflow for the city's Victorian sewage system is the Thames. And as the city's grown, overflows have become a regular occurrence.
So when the system was built, this happened quite infrequently, a couple of times a year perhaps. Now this happens an average of once a week. And so in a typical year, 40 million tonnes of storm sewage, which is sewage and rainwater, spills directly into the Thames.
Tunnelling was completed last year after 7 years of work. When it becomes fully operational in 2025, it should remove 95% of the waste that currently goes into the Thames. But while this costly project is impressive, the record of UK water companies more generally is under fire. Environment Agency figures show that in 2022 there were more than 800 sewage spills per day on average in UK waterways.
We've got water companies that are getting a lot of money. We've got a government regulator. What's it doing? So some are taking those responsibilities quite innovatively, but whether there's that level of investment that we've got in London, I'm not sure that's the case yet.
While the Tideway Tunnel should help to clean up London's famous river, the prospect of a wider improvement for Britain's waters is a long way off. Paul Barber, CGTN, London.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, France and Colombia make it through to the last 8 in the Women's World Cup.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw. The clean-up operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So into the attention of world leaders.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew. And in these mountains, they recently finished building a power plant.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. France is through to the quarter-finals after thrashing Morocco 4-0 in Adelaide.
Morocco were aiming to become the first African side to win a knockout match at the Women's World Cup, but France went 3-0 ahead within the first 25 minutes. Eugénie Le Sommer added a fourth goal in the second half. That was her second goal of the game. France will now face co-host Australia for a place in the semi-finals.
In the other game, Colombia beat Jamaica 1-0. Catalina Usme scored the only goal of the match in Melbourne to end Jamaica's World Cup dream. Colombia will now face European champions England for a place in the last four.
It was a magnificent closing ceremony, bringing to the end the Summer World University Games in Chengdu after 12 days of fierce competition.
The host China topped the medal table with more than 170 medals. Our correspondent Wang Mungjie reports.
A celebration of friendship, sportsmanship and joy. The curtain of this year's World University Games fell in Chengdu. From swimming to gymnastics, from basketball to table tennis, China has bagged over 100 gold medals at the Games. But the event is about more than medals. Over 6,500 athletes from across the world have competed in 18 sports. It's all about the spirit of dedication and friendly competition. This idea is fully reflected at the closing ceremony of the Universiade.
We celebrate with the world and bid farewell to each other. This is the theme of the closing ceremony. We want to share China's youth spirit and make the world feel the stimulation.
But if college students merely participate in competitions without communication, they would lose the significance of the Universiade, with China doing a lot to facilitate people-to-people exchanges.
Many students meet, they become a team, they are building friendships, and that's what happens with the cities when all the people from the cities come together. When the whole world comes to join us, everyone will be together.
The stage director said he has learnt a lot from Chengdu as Germany is preparing to be the host country of the Summer Universiade 2025.
During the past 2 weeks, it's been a happy sight to see the students taking to the streets of Chengdu and communicate with local people. They can see a real China where the venues and organizations are convenient and the people are warm. It's hard to say goodbye, but the door of the best band or awesome Chengdu is always open. CGTN, Chengdu.
The headlines again. China's imports and exports dropped faster than expected in July, raising expectations that more government stimulus could be on the way.
Our other headlines: Italy approves a 40% windfall tax on banks' profits, with proceeds to go to help those struggling with the cost of living.
And talks open in Brazil aimed at a historic deal to end deforestation in the Amazon.
And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching.
There's more on all of our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
And you can go to CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. But we'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all the team here in London, goodbye.
Goodbye.